Hi everyone, my name is Jacquelyn Benson and I am an assistant professor in the Department of Human Development and Family Science at the University of Missouri. Today I will be hosting a short video demonstrating how you can conduct basic data analysis in Microsoft Excel. As a family science educator, we often collect data in the form of needs assessments or course evaluations to determine what family life education programs are needed in our communities, and also what type of impact our programs are having in terms of shaping attitudes and beliefs, changing behaviors, or increasing knowledge and skills. However, the data we collect from these needs assessments or course evaluations, as I've just described, are not useful until they're analyzed. Now, I understand the prospect of conducting data analysis might seem intimidating, but I promise you can actually be very simple and actually even a little bit fun. Today, what I'll be demonstrating is how you can do simple descriptive statistics using Microsoft Excel. So to begin, before you can use Excel, what you'll need to do is prepare the surveys that you had participants fill out. So here is an example of a survey that you might pass out to participants who visited your classroom and participated in your course. This is an example of an evaluation that we use here at the University of Missouri for a course that we offer on brain health. So you can see these questions like 7 through 15, they reflect content related to brain health. But we also ask questions of the respondents, of the participants, about their impressions of the course. You can see these first several questions address some of that. How many sessions they've attended, if they enjoyed it overall, if they found the material helpful, if they'd recommend the course. There are some opportunities for them to write in responses. You can see that here with 19A. If they said yes, they thought some of, there was some content or topics missing from the course, they could describe what they meant there. With 23, another opportunity for them to comment. And then at the end of the survey, we asked them to fill out these demographic questions. And these are the items I'm going to use for the demonstration today. So typical demographics address, ask respondents to report their birthday or their age, their gender, their race, marital status, education, income, and health. So this is a good sample survey. So going back to what I had said a few moments ago, what you'll need to do before you start doing anything in Excel is preparing the surveys. So when all of them have been returned, you'll need to code them before you can enter any data. Now, I've done a lot of work to make sure that this survey is coded ahead of time, or it has numbers assigned to each of the items or the response options for the items, so that I'll have to do less of this when I get my surveys back. But you may have chose to design your surveys in a different way that had less numbers. Maybe you just used words for the participants to read and then circle instead of numbers. And that's okay. If you did that, you'll just need to assign the numbers. So to begin, you'll need to give each survey a unique ID number if they've not already been pre-assigned. So here's where I've typed in a unique ID number or participant ID up here at the top, and I am assigned this number 1. Then you will need to give each survey item or question here. So this is a question or an item. Organization of class content, you will need to give them a variable name. So as an example, I'll just bring my Excel sheet over here so you can see the variable name that I assigned for this first item, organization of class content. I assign the variable name org content. These should be short descriptions, no more than 15 characters in Excel. If you're ever going to export data into a software like SPSS, you'll want to keep the characters to 8 or fewer. But they need to be short and they need to make sense to you. Now, you'll certainly want to be recording all this information in what we refer to as a code book. These are a type of reference manual, includes all the survey details. They're often created using sometimes very sophisticated software, but for small projects like this, and many that you might be participating in, you can just use your preferred word processing software to create your code book, so Microsoft Word. And really all a code book it's a very important separate document from your surveys, from your Excel file, but it's simple in that it's just a place for you to log all this information so that you, if you're going to analyze data in the future, you can go back and recall what variable names you assign for each item, or if you have someone else analyze the data, they can use it as a reference. Again, as I said, it's a reference manual to see the description for each of the variable names you have in the Excel file. So organizational content, the question asking respondents to score the course on organizational content, I just summarized to org_content. Similarly with question 2, relevance of information presented, I gave it the variable name relevance. Usefulness of class activities here, item number 3, I gave it the variable name activities, so on and so forth. You can see I gave different names. And really, it doesn't matter what those variable names are. They just need to make sense to you, and they need to be brief. Like I said, 15 or less, or possibly, if you think you'll ever use this in SPSS, 8 or less is a good rule of thumb. For all categorical or nominal items, you'll want to assign the numerical value for each response option. So what do I mean by that? Actually, many of the items on the survey here are categorical or nominal. For example, especially in the demographics, where I had said earlier I would be using as our example for this video. So with marital status, these are different categories that they can select, and I've assigned a value to each of these. Similarly with the question race, I assigned these numbers to represent each of these categories of race that the respondent can select when they're filling out the survey. As I mentioned, you might have a survey that doesn't have these numbers here, or you can already include them in your survey so you don't have to add them later. It's really just personal preference. Sometimes, depending on your target audience, you may want to ensure that your surveys are really clean and simple and don't have a lot of visual noise. So it might be best to not include these numbers and then assign them later after you get the surveys back. Okay, so once you've assigned a numerical value for each response option, you'll also need to assign numbers if there's any items that ask them to rank. We call these Likert scale items. And an example of that would be these here on the first page of the survey. So 7 through 15, for example, where they're asked to report if they feel they've achieved the following objectives, ranging from not at all to a great extent, and there's been a number assigned to each of these response options. Notice that the higher numbers are assigned to those that reflect a higher degree of experience or attitude or knowledge acquisition, whatever the question is really assessing. So you wouldn't want to reverse this, right? You wouldn't want 4 to represent not at all. So make sure that it's intuitive. Similarly down here, rule of thumb is usually no is assigned to 0 and yes is assigned to 1, or maybe no is assigned 1 and yes is assigned 2. Yes usually reflects a higher number because no represents 0 or the lack of an experience or attitude about something. Okay, so once you have your surveys all coded, you can move on to creating the data set. And you saw a little glimpse of that earlier when I was showing you my variable names, but here's a sample data set. It's actually pretty straightforward. In your data set, each row represents a person. So the rows are represent all these cells horizontally. So this entire row here is the data that's been submitted on one survey by one person. And I've assigned the participant ID here in the first column. So you can see I've entered each participant ID. And in this data set, I just entered data for 10 participants. Again, this is just a sample data set. It's made up. But I have 10 participants here. And then each row reflects that participant's responses to the survey. So participant 1, their response or the value they assigned for the question about organizational content. Just as a refresher, that's this question here. So participant 1 scored organization of class content a 3, and you can see 3 has been entered there. So very straightforward. Each row represents a person. Each column represents a variable. Column B represents the variable, organizational content, relevance, so on and so forth. You want to make the first row of the Excel sheet always your variable row. That's the row type. In this row, you'll type all the variable names. You start at the beginning of the survey and work your way through until the end. So again, much of this is just intuitive, or you want to reflect what would be intuitive thinking about this. So the first item on the survey at the very top was ID, so that's going to be my first variable that I enter in. And the last question on the survey is also the last variable I've entered into the data set, health. The very last column here. So this is what your data set will look like when you're finished with it, this example here that I have. And once your data is entered, then you're ready to conduct some basic analyses. So for this video, I'm just going to show you how you can compute some simple descriptive statistics. Descriptive statistics just describe your sample and the responses to the survey questions. You can definitely do more sophisticated data analyses, but the goal here is to just give you a quick flavor for what it's like to do some analyses in Excel, and you can certainly explore ways to do some more sophisticated bivariate analyses in Excel if that's something you'd like to do, but we will not be reviewing any of that in this video today. So since there are many types of descriptive statistics, it of course will be up to you to select which ones make the most sense for your survey questions, but I'm just going to go through a few common ones and their corresponding Microsoft Excel command. So I will demonstrate how you can calculate an average score, a median, the mode, some frequencies, and then finally I'll show you how you can create a graph here in Microsoft Excel. So for the average, I'm going to scroll over to the demographic variables I have here. So those include age, gender, ethnic background, race, marital status, education, income, and health. And I'm going to show you how you can calculate, it's actually quite quick and simple, how you can calculate some of these descriptive statistics I just mentioned. So, for example, the average statistic. All you would have to type in here into the cell just below. I just choose a cell just below the data. Equals, every command begins with equal, and then type average. You can see it auto-populates, but I usually just finish typing it. Parenthesis. You can select the range here, highlight that, end parenthesis, and hit enter. And that will generate an average for you. So the average age of this sample is 58.6. Now, what if I want to calculate the median? As you know, sometimes the mean or the average is it's a pretty fickle number. It can be impacted quite a bit by an outlier. Say someone was 120, it's going to skew the average much higher. So a median sometimes, in some cases, can be a better summary statistic to calculate. In this example case, we're not going to see it look very different from the average, but it's, again, quite simple. You'll just equals median, parentheses, highlight again the data you want included, and parentheses, and enter. And that reflects the median age. So the median is that middle value. It's the middle value where half of the responses fall below and half fall above. Average, again, is the arithmetic average of all the responses to a specific question. Mode. A mode is the most reflects the most common response. So if you want to know the most common age that was entered, we can calculate that. Equals mode, and parentheses. And so the most common age that was entered into the survey was 65. Some of the stuff you can see very quickly, just because I only have 10 participants in the data set. You have a much larger data set, and of course these statistics are more meaningful. The fact that 65 was the most common response offered may not say a lot when it's such a small sample, right? So not every summary statistics, and there are more than just these 4 that I'm going to describe in the graphs, is always useful, and you won't use some of these for all variables. It wouldn't make sense to calculate an average for a lot of the categorical variables we have, for example. So that is an example, again, of the average, the median, and the mode. And I calculated those 3 descriptive statistics for the variable age. You can do that perhaps for income, for health, depending on if that, is intuitively, if it intuitively makes sense to calculate an average of some of those. The final statistic that I'm going to demonstrate is how you can calculate a frequency. So that the frequency is the number of times a specific response was chosen. This is typically used for categorical variables, so it's very helpful for us with these demographics. I'm going to use the variable race as my example here. So equals count if, it's a command that you type in to calculate a frequency. You select the data, and then you type, before you put the end parenthesis, you type comma 1, and that reflects how often a respondent, how many times the response 1 was provided in the survey. So 9 people reported their race. If you recall, we assigned the value 1 to the race white Caucasian. So there were 9 participants who reported their race as white or Caucasian. And although it's easy to see just visually here, let's, for demonstration's sake, see how many people responded that they were African American. So that is equals, equals count if, comma 2, and parenthesis, enter. So of course, 1 person reported they're African American. And there were several response options for race, if you recall from the survey that I had. I'll pull that back up. So there were 5 options here that they could select. You could do a count for 3, 4, and 5 if you wanted, but because I can visually see that there's no more, no alternative options selected besides 1 and 2, I'll just do the count for those 2. As far as marital status, I've already done the count for marital status. There are 5 options here that people can select. As a reminder, here's the survey. So they could report married, unmarried, living with a partner, or cohabiting, separated or divorced, widowed, never married. So there's 5 options there. And for the count, on marital status, what that would look like is similar to the ones I just did for race. I'll just repeat it here. Equals count if. Select the range, and I want to see how many people reported that they were married, which was assign the value of 1, so comma, 1, in parentheses, enter. So 4 individuals reported that they were married. 1 person reported that they were unmarried. 1 person reported that they were separated or divorced. 1 person reported widowed, and 1 person reported never married. So that's how you would calculate frequencies. You have to do so as a separate command for each possible response, as you see I've done here. There are 5 responses. Again, with the variable marital status, there are 5 responses here. So for each one of those, I have to type a separate command, as I've done here. Okay, so those are examples of just 4 simple descriptive statistics, very common ones that you might calculate when you're wanting to generate a really brief impact report on your course evaluations for the classes that you teach. You might also really like to include a graph, and that's one of the easiest ways to communicate your survey results is with a graph. Lots of different graphs that you can choose. They show relations, comparisons, distributions in the data. You want to make sure your graphs are very clean, simple, and of course appropriate for the type of data you are illustrating. So there are scatter plots, there are line graphs, there are bar graphs, pie graphs, etc. that you can choose from. To make a graph in Microsoft Excel, you'll need to compute the frequency of responses for the variable. We've already done that here for marital status. We've computed the frequency of responses for the variable, and there was 5 options, as you recall. And then what you'll do is you'll click on the Insert tab up here, top left. This brings up different types of graphs. As you can see here, many different types you can choose from. What we'll want to do then is highlight the frequency counts, and then click on the type of graph that you want to make. You can use chart tools then to customize your graph. So you can make a pie chart. And what's nice is if you hover over the options, you can see what the different ones would look like before you choose them. So let's just choose a pie graph here. And that demonstrates our data, or reflects our data in a nice visual graph, which can be really helpful when wanting to generate reports for our supervisors or even out to the community so that they can see the impact of the work that we're doing as family life educators. And just one last thing to mention, again, you can edit your chart using chart tools, and in some cases you can just click right in and edit your chart that way. So, and there's lots of options for editing the chart here. Color, if you'd like, you can change that style. I won't go into great detail here in the video, but it can be quite fun to play with the graphs and figure out different ways to show, to illustrate your data. But keep in mind, you want to keep your graphs clean and simple. So that is just a brief tutorial on how you can calculate basic data analysis in Microsoft Excel. Again, we covered how you would prepare your surveys, then creating the data set in Excel, and then finally how you would quickly calculate average, median, mode, and frequencies, and then generate graphs from those frequencies that you would create. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me at bensonjj@missouri.edu. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great day.